So let's get started. So today we are concluding our study of Judges, and in a few weeks we will be resuming our Bible study with the book of Samuel. And so we have to finish up the last chapter, but the last chapter also really in many ways summarizes the book. So we'll make some comments about that. So if you will recall, we've got up to the point the Civil War is over. The Benjamites have been completely routed. And we learn at the very end of chapter 21, we learned that in, let's say, verse 47, that there were a remnant of only 600 men, okay, from Benjamin. That's it. There were 600 men, and they ran to the desert to a place called Selarimon, okay, and they sat there for 4 months. Now, 600 men, no women, children, no cities. Everything has been completely destroyed by the other tribes. This is a horrific, not just Civil War itself is horrific, not just the fact that the way it was handled and how horrible it was, but they go in and literally destroy Benjamin, except for these 600 men that are in hiding. Okay. And then it says, and we have that in the next sentence. The people of Israel, the other tribes went to the tribe of Benjamin, and they put to sword every single city from all the animal, everything that was in those cities, everything they burnt. They killed by sword, they burnt by fire. There was absolutely nothing left. And that's the end of chapter 20. And now we start with chapter 21. And chapter 21 really takes us back to before the war even starts. It gives us background. It says that the people of Israel swore in the Mitzpah. Now, they were in the Mitzpah when they gathered before they went out to war. And we are only now learning for the first time part of what was going on there. They swore that no one of them, no man in these tribes would give their daughters to a man from Benjamin as wives. Now, remember why this would have been, and it's very possible that they took this oath even before they decided to go out to war, because the whole reason for this war was the way the people of Gibeah, which was a tribe, which was a city in Benjamin, the way they treated this woman. And so it made a lot of sense before they even decided to go to the war. They'll say, well, first things first, we are not going to let any of our daughters, okay, marry a man from Benjamin, because look how they treat their women. This is horrific. So we are now hearing this, that this was the story. This happened. And why is this a problem? Okay. And then we say everybody comes to Beit El. Now remember, Beit El is, and we talked about this, was it actually Beit El, the city of Beit El, or was it the house of God, which was at Shiloh? It's not clear, but this is the same place that they had gone to consult with Phinehas, and via Phinehas to consult through the Urim V'Tumim, the breastplate, to get God's answer. And God gave them the various answers, whether they should go to war or not. And remember, God did want them to go to war. He didn't promise them they would win initially. And in fact, many in Benjamin fell, but he did send them to war. And we discussed this, and we talked about the fact that clearly it was like a plague on both your houses. I mean, they decided to go to war. It was their decision. But on the other hand, God let them go. Okay, God didn't say go to war. He said Judah will go first. He'll say, yes, go. In the end, he said, yes, go, and you will win. But you have this sense that basically God is allowing these forces to destroy each other, because on both sides they are so terrible. Okay, so we have now all of a sudden they come back to the same place and they sit and they cry. And why? And they're saying, and it's kind of crazy, why? And they're kind of blaming God. They're saying, why, Lord God of Israel, did this happen in Israel? Okay, that we are now missing a whole tribe. What they have succeeded in doing is essentially destroying an entire tribe of Israel. And they're saying, oh God, how did this happen? Oh God, how did this happen? They did it. It's crazy. Okay. And then it says on the next day, they built an altar, they brought offerings, etc. Okay, so now they're trying to solve the problem. They realize they had this oath. They now have totally destroyed Benjamin with the exception of 600 men, but nobody can give their daughters to these 600 men. There are no more women left in Benjamin. How are these people going to marry? Okay. Now we're going to go back to another story. This also happened earlier on, and a little bit earlier, but this probably happened right after the war. Okay. And it says here, no, this goes back to around the same time they took the oath before they went to war. We have another oath here, okay? And they said, first of all, they're saying, who is it? They're taking stock. Who is it that didn't join us for war? So this is after the war. But then they're going back and saying, because we had a great oath, so now we have a second oath that was sworn before they went to war. We had a great oath. Anybody who does not go up, okay, to the mitzvah will die. These were really crazy people, okay? They're taking an oath. Nobody gives their daughters to Benjamin. And the second oath is anybody who doesn't join us in battle will be killed. So then in chapter 6, then we suddenly see that, this is jumping back and forth to what happened earlier, what happened a little bit later, and then what's happening now. Today, after the war, they suddenly realize that they are sorry. They are sorry that they destroyed Benjamin to the extent that there is now going to be cut off. There's missing a tribe in Israel. So what are they going to do? They're saying, here we have two problems. Okay. So first of all, they realized that there are people who didn't come out to mitzvah. And these are the people from Yavesh Gilad. Yavesh Gilad. Gilad is on the eastern side of the Jordan. And it is part of the tribe of Manasseh. Remember, Manasseh is split. Half is east of the Jordan, half is west of the Jordan. And so these people in Yavesh Gilad didn't come, okay? And again, we're saying what happened at the point at which they realized, again, not now, but like a little bit earlier, when they realized that nobody came from Yavesh Gilad, they sent people there, 12,000 people there, and they, again, they destroyed them. Who did they destroy? They destroyed the men and the women who were already married. The women who had already, were husbanded, it says here, okay? And so we have two terrible situations that had already happened before. One is they've destroyed everybody in Benjamin except for 600 men. The other is because they didn't join the battle, they destroyed everybody in Yavesh Gilad from the tribe of Manasseh. That's not all of Manasseh. It's just that one city in Manasseh. They destroyed everybody there, with the exception of 400 virgin girls. So of the 600 men, they now say, we have a solution for 400 of them. Because the people from Yavesh Gilad never joined us for the war, they also never joined in the oath of not giving their daughters to the people of Benjamin. So these 400 girls from Yavesh Gilad are matched up with 400 of the 600 men of Benjamin. Okay? Now we still have a problem. And so they went and they told them and they matched them up and everybody was fine. And they made peace with the people of Benjamin, but they still have a problem with 200 people in Benjamin that don't have wives. And nobody can give them women. What are they going to do? All these people made this. Oh, so what are they going to do? And here we have in verse 16, we have new people coming into the new characters in the story. The elders of the community. This is the elders of Israel. Now, we haven't met the elders before, except in, two other situations, which we'll get to in a minute. But basically, suddenly they are coming in. Until now, every time they consulted having to do with this story, they went to Beit El, they went to the tabernacle, they talked to Phineas, they got the answer from God, but the answer from God is very cryptic. And I explained how that goes. You have the breastplate and you have, lights that shine up, and it's basically yes, no, whatever. And the most we got out of God at that point was on the third day, yes, go up and you will prevail. But this is after many people in those tribes were already decimated. And God did not tell them, go destroy everybody in Benjamin. Okay, never told them to do that. Okay, so, but here you have a situation which they realize that has gone wrong. They're trying to make peace with Benjamin, but more important than that, they're trying to reconstitute the tribe of Benjamin. And so we have 200 Benjamin men that they have to find wives for. So here along comes the elders. And what are they saying? First of all, they're describing the problem. We made an oath. We can't give our daughters to Benjamin. So what do they say? Pretty soon there's an annual holiday in Shiloh. Okay. And then this is also fascinating because we have here the geographical coordinates. Where is Shiloh? Shiloh is north of Beit El, towards the east, along the road that goes up from Beit El to Shechem, south of Livonah. And it's great because if you go to Shiloh today, you see across the way, a bit southwest of Shiloh is a community called Maleh Livonah. And Maleh Livonah is named for this Livonah. It's up on a hill, and halfway down the hill is the remains of a community that the Arabs gave the name to Lobna. So I'm assuming that preserved the name Livonah. Okay, and this has helped us to this very day locate Shiloh. Since then, since our original locating of Shiloh in the 70s, there have been many archaeological digs there, and there is a mosaic dating to the Byzantine period, of course, not to the biblical period, but to the Byzantine period that identifies the place as Shiloh. It says the word Shiloh on it. So it's interesting. Are we 100% sure it's Shiloh? No, but the archaeology is certainly pointing to it. I would say 99.9% it's Shiloh. Anyway, so they come there and they're talking about an annual festival. What happens during the annual festival? They go out and they dance in the vineyards. The women go and dance in the vineyards. Now, we have a tradition that this is actually Tu B'Av, which is the 15th day of the month of Av. And it is a day that is preserved in Jewish tradition today. It's not a special holiday, so to speak, but it's a happy day. And it's kind of the Jewish equivalent of Valentine's Day. It's a holiday of love, okay? And a lot of people like to get married on that day. But what's the origin of it? So in the Talmud, we learn about this day because of things that were going on during the Second Temple period. And the Talmud tells us that the women would all dress in white. They would go out to the vineyards and they would dance. And we know also based on the calendar, any of you who are participating, if any of you are with Hayovel and come and participate in the annual harvest, you'll know that this is right in the middle or even towards the end of the harvest of the grapes. So, or it's more in the middle than towards the end today, but it's certainly a time when they would celebrate the harvest, when they already know how bountiful the harvest is, and they would be in the process of bringing in the grapes. So it's all connected with that. But from here, we learn that this is probably the origin of that holiday. Already back at this time, during the times of the judges, well before the first temple even, there was an annual holiday at Shiloh where they went out to the vineyards. So what's the idea? The idea is here, verse 21. So when you see that all the girls of Shiloh are going out to dance, you should go out to the vineyards and each person should grab for a wife one of the girls. And in that way, and take them back to Benjamin. Okay. And then if their fathers, okay, would come and argue with you, say, what do you mean you took these women? You should answer them. He's saying to the fellows from Benjamin. He says, please, take mercy upon us. We didn't grab any of these people in war. This was not a violent grabbing. He says, you were not willing to take us, to give them to us. And of course, referring to that oath. And that's exactly what happened. In other words, it was a game. It was a game that enabled the women to go out and they would become husbands for these Benjamin men. But instead of going through the normal channels, which is always that the father gives his daughter to someone as a wife, this way they got around that and they had the men grabbing the girls. Okay. Now, if any of you have seen the film in Shiloh, they show this at the end and it's very romantic. You have these girls and they have a basket of grapes on their shoulders and they're out dancing in the vineyards and they meet this man and a man looks at her very dewy-eyed and she looks at him very dewy-eyed and it's so extremely romantic. Was it also romantic? I don't know. But this idea of grabbing was clearly part of the game. It was so that it wouldn't be seen as that the fathers willingly gave their daughters, and in that case would have violated the oath. In this case, there was no violation of the oath, but they could still solve the problem. Okay, and that's all very nice. That's exactly what they did. They danced, they took their house, they went back to Benjamin, they rebuilt their territory, they rebuilt their cities, and they settled there. And then we have here the last verse 24, and from there, meaning from Shiloh, all the children of Israel went, each to its own tribe, each to its family. Everyone went from there to its own territory. And this, by the way, strengthens, in my mind, all the nation of Israel is here, and they're going from here, from Shiloh, back to their territory. And in my mind, it strengthens the understanding that when they talk about Beit El, the house of God, they are indeed talking about Shiloh. They're all in the same place because everyone is there. It's the girls who go out to the vineyards are the daughters of Shiloh itself or from the area. But it seems clear that here there are representatives from all the nations who have come together to allow this to happen. And from there, they're going to go back. The war is over, and they're going to, go back, have peace, and Benjamin's rebuilt, and everybody's in their tribe. All good, all wonderful. Not really. Because what's the last verse of Judges? In those days, there was no king of Israel. Each person did whatever they wanted. Okay. Now, this, as we mentioned before, this verse, exact same verse, turns up 3 different times, all in these last 2 terrible stories. This is the final verse, and then we have it 2 more times in the context of the idol of Micah and that whole story there. That's all kinds of icky, and particularly in this story with the concubine of Gibeah and the resulting civil war. And there's no question then, and we discussed this earlier, that it's not clear when these stories actually took place. There are hints that refer to the fact Phineas is there, and other hints that indicate that perhaps at least this story took place much earlier, at the beginning of the period. I think the story of Micah may have taken place later, but again, that's also not true, because at the end of that story, it says that the temple of Micah was in existence the whole time the tabernacle at Shiloh was in existence, and we know the tabernacle rested at Shiloh at the very beginning of the period of the Judges. So, it's not exactly clear, but these chapters are put at the end of the book to tell us something about how the scriptures are characterizing this whole time that we're dealing with, the nearly 400 years of the time of Judges. Awful, and awfuler. It's just terrible. Okay. And these 2 stories, the first story talking more about pagan worship that has gotten to such an extent that it also involves theft and involves violence and all kinds of stuff, but also rendered around this pagan worship. And the second story, of course, which is immorality, depravity, civil war, violence, rape. I mean, everything is just absolutely so awful. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have this mention here in verse 16 about the elders of the nation. And the elders of the nation play a role in the book of Judges, in just 2 places. Okay, so first of all, at the very, very beginning of Judges, we see again a repetition of something we already know from Joshua, that Joshua dies. Let me see if I can just find that. I had it before. Anyway, there is a verse that talks about Joshua dying, and it says there that and all the elders of that nation of that time. If I can find it quickly. Whatever. I'll send you an email with the exact verse. It's there at the beginning of Judges. Okay, so that's things. The other time when the elders of any group plays a role is in the story of Jephthah. Okay, because you remember Jephthah is dealing with problems from the nations surrounding them, and Jephthah at the time is this outcast. He's not part of the elite of the tribe of the people of Gilead, of the tribe of Manasseh, and he is really an outcast, and they're trying to decide what to do. And as part of that, it is the elders of this area. You see, the elders of Gilead. You'll see that in chapter 11, verse 5. Okay, so as they're being at war with the Ammonites, and they're not quite sure what to do. It's the elders of Gilead who go and beckon to Jephthah and bring him, and they're the ones who appoint him as the judge or the military leader. So we do know, and in fact, in Jewish tradition, there is in the Mishnah, there is a setting out of tradition, of how the tradition got passed, okay? Tradition meaning beginning with revelation at Sinai. We got the 10 Commandments, we got all the laws, we got the 5 books of Moses. The Mishnah then is referring to how does the tradition get passed on? Because as you well know, not every detail is written in the Bible. What people very often refer to rabbinic law is actually a tradition that begins in Moses' time, of traditions that are passed along orally. In that case, the Mishnah tells us that it begins with Moses, hands it over to Joshua. From Joshua, hands it over to the elders, okay? And from the elders, hands it over to the prophets. Now, in the Mishnah is talking about a spiritual leadership, okay? But what's very interesting, the Mishnah talks about Moses and Joshua. Both of those people serve as both a political leadership and a spiritual leadership. When we get to the elders, what we are seeing in the book of Judges is here and there, we see elders popping up, but they certainly are not an important role in the spiritual or political leadership of the nation. And it's very interesting, because when we talked about the kings are nowhere mentioned in this Mishnaic tradition, because the Mishnaic tradition is not talking about political leadership. From the Bible, we see when we're talking about political leadership, we talk about Joshua, Moses, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, okay? Samuel is a prophet. He's a prophet, but he's similar to a judge in many ways. In other words, he is also a spiritual leader, but he's also a political leader. But then he is the one who ends up anointing Saul and then later David. And from then on, we have kings. Okay, we have prophets, but prophets, at once Saul is crowned king, from then on, the kings do the politics, and the prophets do the spiritual leadership and the messages from God, okay? Here in Judges, we're in this in-between time. And I mentioned when we started studying Judges, well, there's a bit of a debate. What was the ideal kind of political leadership? Was it this more diffuse leadership where we have judges in the book of Judges, where they rise up to deal with a particular situation? They deal with it more or less successfully. Some are more honoring God, some are less honoring God, and they come from a particular tribe, and very often only take care of problems of a particular tribe or a very small region of Israel. There is no national leadership throughout the book of Judges, okay? We have here, however, this mention that there is something called the elders. And so there are people who say the ideal leadership was not a king. And we know that and we're going to deal with this when we start Samuel. When the nation comes to Israel, to Samuel, and say, bring us a king, Samuel is very upset. Samuel does not believe that the right kind of leadership for the nation of Israel is a king. And he talks about the possibilities for corruption. Once you have a king, and then the king passes on the kingship to his sons and his grandsons, etc., you have the possibility of corruption. It is an absolute power. Now, you have some kings that are very devoted to God, even though there's sometimes little bits and pieces of corruption. Because they are righteous people, it can be corrected, okay? They can repent. But we know as the book of Kings moves on, after the book of Samuel, we get to the book of Kings, and we have a disaster, okay? So those people who say the king is not a good idea, when they're discussing this sentence, in those days there's no king of Israel, what they're saying is, it's not that there's no king of Israel, they're saying that God is not the king of Israel. They're not seeing this king as a political leader. They're seeing this king as the God the king of the universe and the king of Israel. And what they're saying is the people who are these different leaderships are not righteous. They're not doing their jobs. And in fact, according to that theory, the actual political leaders of the time and the judges were not these individual judges who, as we saw, come to deal with a particular issue, mostly militarily, but the elders, okay? And we see these elders coming to play in this story. So you can ask yourself, and I think here in the story of the concubine of Gibeah, we can see more than anything else, the failure of the elders. At the end, the elders come forward with a wonderful plan. They figure this out, even though there's an oath, they have this great plan to bring the women into the vineyards, and that way we're going to reestablish the tribe of Benjamin. But if they were true leaders, they would have been there at the beginning to avoid this terrible bloodshed to begin with. And so what I'm seeing is happening here is two statements at the end of this, or even three. If the king is a king, and based on those who say a king is a more ideal political structure for Israel, then that's simple. Here we saw a period of almost 400 years, no king, decentralized leadership, a mess. Now we have to move into the book of Samuel and move into a centralized leadership through a king. But if you think that a decentralized leadership is really better because that puts on each tribe and each individual more responsibility to be righteous and do what God wants, and we don't want this powerful central leadership because of its potential for corruption, that then the possibility would have been the elders. But even here we're seeing that the elders failed. It didn't work. And so no matter how you see the book of Judges and whether the king is the ideal or it isn't the ideal, no matter what, everybody failed. Phinehas failed as the high priest. The elders failed. The people failed. The judges failed. It was a mess. And with that in mind, we will now be moving into the book of Samuel in a few weeks. Jen, one last thing that I just want to point out before we conclude, and that is think about what we have studied now. We've studied stories about very, very human people. Some of them very righteous, some of them did amazing things, some brought salvation to Israel. Think of Samson for a moment, what he started out as being and how he really made such a difference to save the nation and to bring Jewish pride, shall we say, as they're dealing with the Philistines. But then he really deteriorates and we see them. He has a weakness. He has a weakness for women. And this kind of makes him straight from the path. At the end, he redeems himself. But this is a person. This is a human being with his flaws. And the Bible does not try to censor or cover up the flaws. He doesn't want to sweep any of these things under the carpet. And this is what we see throughout the book of Judges. And in fact, we see this throughout the Bible. And very often, when people try to educate the young people, they want to only tell the good stuff. You want to tell the stories about the heroes. Look at these heroes. They're righteous. They're wonderful. That's what you have to be with. It's kind of like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man all rolled into one. Okay. But that's not who people are. And people are expected to be people. They're not expected to be angels. And therefore, it is very important that we all see and hear and understand, not just when people are righteous and doing what they're supposed to do, but when they fail, because these are things that can also instruct us as well. That is the book of Judges we have just finished. So, open your mics and any comments, questions? Oh, we got claps here. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody. See you in a month. Bye-bye.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at CFOIC.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.